Thank you very much for having me. Much appreciated. I'm going to try and stay on point. I'm also going to be talking about data, but I've got a very different perspective on data than Concha did. So I created the MusicBrainz project. How many of you have heard of MusicBrainz? Raise your hand. Oh, that's a pretty good number of you guys. Very good. How many of you have used Spotify or BBC Music or any of the other popular music services? Raise your hand. Pretty much everyone. So indirectly, have all used MusicBrainz because all of these services use MusicBrainz one way or another. And they actually give us commercial support for that, which is basically what I'm here to talk about because we've actually changed the way we do commercial support. So we operate all of those projects and others, and if you're interested in some of these other projects, come talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to talk about these projects as well. Now, where we are today, where most people are today, if you have an open source project and you wish to actually be able to support it somehow, typically this is the kind of model that you've got. Your data and your code and copyright can equal money. It's difficult to do. It's hard to actually extract that sort of value from that particular system. What you need to do is you need to set up licenses, you need to set up access keys, you need to set up a lot of stuff. And that's a lot of stuff that goes towards running a business. And this is not really actually doing open source stuff. You're spending your time doing other things and you can't get volunteers to work on these boring business things. So we really need to kind of have some other modes of thinking about this. There's lots of other problems. If another company violates your copyright, what are you going to do? If you don't have a lot of money, you can't hire an IP attorney because they go for like 500 euros an hour. So, and then if you want to go, take on some big company and you want to audit them, you need accountants and all of that is expensive, but you have no money. So how do you start off with that, right? The lack of transparency, which was also mentioned earlier, is a real problem. It's a real problem for open source projects, for bringing any sort of sustainability about. Quite a number of challenges there. So, and again, as I already mentioned, all of this distracts from actually doing open source work, which is what we want to do. This is the things that the volunteers want to work on and not the boring business stuff. So, the network effect. This is Metcalfe's law. Basically, I'll read you what it says. The effect of a telecommunications network is proportional to the square of the number of connected users of the system. Okay, what that really means is, I'll put this in context of a fax machine. The very first fax machine was completely useless. The second fax machine was pretty cool because it could send a fax to the first fax machine. The millionth fax machine started getting really useful because now 1 million people could send each other faxes. So effectively what this says, if you have a network, the more nodes you have on the network, the more fax machines, the more mobile phones, the more computers, the more valuable your network becomes. That's a pretty important realization here. Now, you can do this and you can apply the network effect to data. And really, so what I've done is I've cheekily rewritten Metcalfe's law and said the value of a thriving interconnected data set is proportional to the square to the number of connected users of the data. So there's really two important words in this. One is thriving, and the other one is interconnected. Thriving means that your community is working on the data. They're finding problems, they're adding data, they are removing duplicates, they're merging things. That's exactly what the MusicBrainz community is doing with all the metadata that we've collected. Exactly that. And more importantly, and this is something that I've been talking about for nearly 20 years, and the first person, and I'm really honored for this, to actually give me credit for having the vision that this is important was Tim Berners-Lee, was to create stable identifiers for everything and interlink absolutely everything according to basically the principles of the semantic web. So that means we have stable identifiers that, we've had the same UUID, this long, ugly number that we've applied to U2 in the year 2000, and it's been that way to identify U2 ever since. And it's going to continue to be that way. These stable identifiers, as well as links to other data sets, actually turn your data into more or less a communications network with lots of nodes. And this is an interesting observation because it brings about another way to extract value. So now we have this new proposition that we can actually work with. Data and code and community equals value. The community is now a new and important part. Copyright is no longer part of this equation. which is actually rather quite interesting. So unfettered access, we have all of our projects in Creative Commons CC0 license, which is equivalent to public domain. We ask people to use the data. We make it easy for people to stay in touch with our data, to keep updates and so forth. Because the more people are using our data, the more valuable our data becomes. And I've sort of joked that MusicBrainz has had a drug dealer business model for a long time. And if your community, people, companies get addicted to your data, and then somebody like me, even though mismatched socks, crazy hair comes around and says, hey, you should give us some money, it's probably easier to just give this freaky guy a little bit of money than try and actually find another database, because there's not a lot of databases out there and it's a lot of work. So exactly that. You can ask for commercial support. And commercial support can take a number of different forms. It can be money, it can be hardware, it can be services. Our community works quite a lot on chocolate, and yes, we've actually taken payment in chocolate before. And the basic principles that are now applied here are, if you can make it inexpensive, easy, and positive, companies will pay. Because it's just easier than trying to hide or use the data and hide behind, like, no, we're not really using it. It turns out that I'll get to this at a further point, your community is watching. Your community knows when somebody else is using data. So for instance, in the MusicBrainz world, we have the MusicBrainz test artist. And if we find the MusicBrainz test artist somewhere else in the world, that means they're using our data. And we could say, add a release to the MusicBrainz test artist, and if an hour later this release shows up on somebody else's server, they're using our data. And guess what's gonna happen next? Some freaky-haired guy shows up and is demanding money, right? So that's our basic model. Then when somebody actually supports you, it's important to give praise. So we have our supporters page. If you go to metabrainz.org and click on supporters, there's a list of logos: Google, Amazon, BBC, Last.fm, Spotify, Ticketmaster, Universal Music. It just goes on. And little companies, lots of open source projects. We are effectively the backbone of music metadata on the internet. And we do this all with this open database. So if you can actually extract value by doing an open system and by enabling your data to be a data network, as opposed to extracting value based on copyright, you can actually focus more time, money, energy on doing open source and less on business. I hate business, so this is my own personal interest. This way, my team gets to do more open source. Now, there's some downsides. Not every company is going to support you. But like I said, your community is going to notice, they'll help you find them. And then sometimes you can't get everyone to actually support you. They just refuse. But sometimes you can be really clever about it. Afterwards, if you're interested to find out how I got Amazon to pay an overdue invoice for 3 years by sending them a cake, it's a long story, but it's kind of fun. It's very illustrative. Come see me afterwards. I'll be happy to tell the story. But the downside also is that you have to keep improving your data. The second you stop improving the data, it becomes stale, and then it loses value. So you have to keep going. Your community has to keep going. Your servers have to keep going. Your software has to keep going. Everybody has to keep going. It's kind of tedious at times, but that's the new economic proposition that we're following. So let me try and close this up real quick. I've got 2 more slides before I get off the stage. MetaBrainz, before 2015, we licensed our data, and we had a live data feed that would give you updates on an hourly basis. This was really important because we have some 20 million recordings in our system, and it's really hard to keep track of what's changing. So we make it very easy to keep track of what's changing. We put out a replication packet once an hour, you get to see what's changing, there's value in that. The only problem is that not everyone needs hourly updates. There are plenty of companies who are happy to take their updates once a month. That left us with no income from any of these companies. So we basically got to about $250,000 a year. We had a team of 3 people and some servers, and we were resource constrained, we were unhappy, we were frustrated, and we were not growing. So in 2015, we launched a new MetaBrainz website. We created new logos. We became a lot more professional. You know, our executive director still can't dress himself, but that's cool. So we decided to go to a network effect support model. And that has actually been working out really well for us. Like I said, we showed the logos of the customers on our page, and they're happy to have their logo on our page. They're happy to say, we have these support levels that start with bronze, silver, gold, and then unicorn. And to actually have customers say, it's like, well, we're bronze today, but we hope to become unicorns. And they're saying this in all seriousness is kind of fun. So we're actually poking a little bit of fun at ourselves. We're not too serious about this. And it's working. It is really working for us. So we doubled our revenue in under 3 years. Which for, like, in traditional business sort of sense is a fantastic sort of thing, because if you get 10% revenue growth in a year, you're doing really well. But for the last 3 years, we've had over 30% revenue growth. We now have a team of 9 people scattered between Chicago and Assam in India. We've taken on more projects. We still kind of feel resource constrained because we'll always have more ideas than resources, but by and large, we're actually making a lot more progress, a lot more people happy, and our services are more reliable and overall functioning a lot better. That's it. That's the nutshell on how we revamped our business model. I know it's slightly a bit different from some of the usual open source talks, but I think there's something to this, and I'm really interested to see how this will pan out in the future. Thank you for having me.